What's up, everybody? Welcome back, and we're tackling a new river today, at least new to me. It's the Savage in Maryland. It's in Bloomington. It's a 4.5 mile run, basically one long continuous 3+. American Whitewater calls it a 4, or at least in places a 4 at 1,000 CFS, which is about what we're running it at. There's a lot of eddies and places to stop, but they're very small, and there are definitely fewer than on most rivers people are used to paddling. So it's very continuous, lots of rapids, lots of little FU rocks, but nothing that's like hyper challenging, I would say. The issue is that since it's long and continuous, it really sort of mandates that you read and run really effectively. And since it's shallow, if you flip over, you are very likely to get some bumps and bruises. A super experienced paddling buddy of mine, Paul, said he's treated more serious injuries on the Savage than anything else he's run, and mostly they are face and head stuff because, like I said, it's so shallow and it's moving so quickly that a flip will often be rewarded with a pretty serious bonk. But that said, if you don't flip over, it is super fun. There aren't holes that'll really beat you up unless you fall into them with no speed and sideways, So as long as you're pointed downstream and following the deep water, you are rocking and rolling. You go so fast. It's so much fun. There's so many little things to do, little surf waves, stuff like that. I brought my code because I hadn't paddled it in like a year and wanted to stay high and dry with the recent shoulder injury. So took it out for a spin, and it just went over everything. The code just like gobbles stuff up. So kind of a cheat code, but also super fun. I recommend it for your first time down if you're a little nervous about the sort of unforgiving nature of the run. This is kind of the intro stuff. The run really kicks off when you'll see us run a broken portion of a dam under a bridge. We're running it on the left. Apparently you can run it on the right now also if you want to, because a flood washed out a portion of it.
Oh, fuck.
Right, isn't this good for read and run practice? Try and pause the video, predict what's going to happen in the next 5 seconds, and see if you got it right. You can practice your read and run with this video too. You'll notice a lot of water on my camera lens here, which is kind of annoying for the video, but it's a good descriptor of all the water that gets in your eyes while you're bouncing through all these waves. Another good thing to practice is what you're doing with your eyes to make sure that you'll be able to see what's coming after that next big wave crest. Personally, I like to do two things to avoid getting water in my eyes in situations like this. The first is I found a really good like minimalist running hat. It's like super thin and it fits under my kayaking helmet. So I get the brim, and then if I'm going to get a bunch of water in the face, I try and just look down a little bit so the brim deflects it. I'll also close my eyes occasionally, like a long blink, knowing that that's going to happen. And if I do get water in my eyes, then what I do is I try to blink it away while staying online.
Did he just go middle?
He went middle right.
Yeah.
We're paddling with some great friends. We've got Keith, who you know and love. We've got Adam in the Red Rewind, who's been just tearing it up recently, running some awesome stuff. We've got Mike and Linda, who we know and love. Awesome paddlers and super helpful and kind and lovely in all the ways you would expect. We've also got Nell and Brooke, who are with us for the first time. It was a pleasure to meet them. They ripped it up. They're, I think, raft guides, but they were in half slices for this and just crushed it. So it was a great day and everything went great. Ultimately, we set shuttle and all of that good stuff. We had one little swim after they ran 3 laps of this thing because it's really easy to go back and forth. But we got the boat, no problem. There was no injury. In fact, an excellent self-rescue where the swimmer was able to get to shore before a strainer, fighting really hard, and walked out with just a little bump and bruise here and there.
Dude, you okay? That looks gnarly.
We're good.
Yeah. That was so fun! That was awesome!
Okay, I don't know about y'all, but I have really bad eyes. And one thing that plays havoc on me in terms of read and run is dappled sunlight streaming in through the trees. The variable like colors and textures and the water and everything, I might as well not be looking at anything at all. So I'm working on trying to decipher what's going on in this visual context. This is kind of like kayaking meditation. You know, it's so continuous that the main thing is just trying to keep your attention on the river. Your mind drifts, you start to feel comfortable, you start chit-chatting, whatever, and bam, a little FU rock spins you around, you fall into a hole, and you scrape your face up. So the main thing is really just trying to keep up with a rapid that's basically 4.5 miles long, although obviously there are a couple little breaks and flatter sections, but it's a really good experience, really good training, I think. I think the gradient is like 75 foot per mile or something like that. So it is pretty steep. That's what makes it continuous. But the other thing that's cool about it is that if you're having a really bad time, you can pretty much walk out anywhere. It's a roadside section the whole way down, as you can see on this little chill stretch here. Since it's continuous, there are fewer eddies to stop in and wait for people to catch up and maintain your spacing. So finding ways to pull over, making sure to check behind you, listening for whistles, all of that good stuff, not getting too bunched up also is all really important on this run. But the good news is, since you can pretty much take any line anywhere with like 2 exceptions, and obviously accounting for wood, you can get around one another if you start to bunch up. So I think I am going to get rid of this Dagger code. Some things it's really good at: going straight through and or over holes, bouncing off of rocks and not flipping over, boofing, landing off of a tall waterfall or something like that doesn't require you to plug it. Slides, maintaining control on slides. Those are things that I've found really useful about this boat. But things I don't like about it are it's too big. It's big and heavy and has a ton of volume. In fact, so much volume that sometimes you ride up and over the water in such a way that you can't really feel what it's doing as clearly as if you were in a lower volume boat. It is also very puffy and big, such that I'm frequently hitting my elbows and sometimes even my head on the boat when I'm getting chundered or that kind of thing. It also doesn't really have edges. Obviously, it does have some edges in the boat, but more or less it's a rounded displacement hull. Those edges really need to be controlled, and that means throwing your weight around in this boat, which can be tiring over time, where, you know, to get the same edge engagement in half slice, you would just kind of flick your hips, but in this thing, you really have to kind of like lift your butt cheek. The other thing is that a result of that boat design is it's kind of mushy to paddle. If you're in lower volume, sort of tight line stuff where you're not actually having to move around powerful water too much to get in position, you're more like bouncing over rocks, high gradient, that kind of thing, it's great. But the minute you have to like do a stout couple moves in, 60,000 CFS or something, in like a big water situation, it really is kind of a mule to paddle. You got to work that thing. And I think I'm going to get a Waka OG, which has better lines. It's much more, or edges. It's much more controllable, kind of sportier, lower volume. And I think that'll be my creek boat from now on. Beta. There's a pipeline running under the bridge. It's broken on the left, so you can run it no problem. If you run it on the right, it acts kind of like a low head dam, so it's sticky. Make sure to boof it. because of wood, which you always need to check for, ask about from people that have just run it, that kind of stuff, we're going left at every island we see. And there is a good amount of wood.